When I prepared myself for this evening, I thought about my own youth. I was about 8 years old when it was the first time my mother took me to a foreign country. All my friends had been to foreign countries before, and I wanted to go to a foreign country. She took me and my elder brother, and she took us to Copenhagen. That this time, when I was in Copenhagen, must have been about the time when you started your professional life. As an urban planner, you did it a couple of years earlier, in the early 60s, I think, and I try to remember the period when that was. It was a time when people believed in endless progress and unlimited growth. We had nuclear power, we sent people flying to the moon, and we thought our possibilities would expand, and humans would get stronger and stronger. And also, it was a time when cities were planned in a way as you've described in your book, Brasilia. Brasilia is the extreme of city planning at that time. The city following the Charter of Athens, which is functionally separated, where you need a car to move around and so on. And at that time, you opposed against this way of planning cities. You really developed a completely different paradigm. And that would be my first question to you. How did a young architect, a young urban planner come to opposing against the mainstream of urban planning, the mainstream of architecture at that time, and what was your motivation to start this? And maybe in your presentation you will show us a little bit about how you developed your ideas, which are so different from what urban planners did at that time. So please welcome.
The story of my life in a very short version. I graduated as an architect in 1960. I was trained as a good modernist, never go down at eye level, always fly over the models and move the objects around. Cities are bad, streets are bad, squares are bad. What is good is freestanding high-rise with grass around. That was what I was trained for. As you mentioned, it was a fantastic time, you know, everything was open. And I rushed out of university to do these wonderful things. Then I married a psychologist. And then we had many interesting discussions back in our house with young architects and young psychologists. And these blasted psychologists, they kept saying, why are you architects not interested in people? Why don't you learn anything about people in your study in the university? And why don't you know anything about the enormous influence your buildings and your city plans have to people's life? So I had to go back to university for another 40 years to learn something about what they never told me. And over the years I made a few books which gradually started to be distributed very widely. I'm very proud that many of my books are now out in the furthest corners of the world, and some of them are used in developing countries to try to make a more humanized city planning there. Then at some point I had to start a planning firm because mayors and councillors and even senators all over the world, they started to say, you can criticize what we are doing, but can't you come and show us what to do? Then I had to start a planning company with my students and the people from my research unit. That was in 2000, and in these 15 years we have seen a fantastic response, because we started to say, if you want a livable, sustainable and healthy city, we can help you. And the moment we said that, the phone started ringing, and we have been working all over the world with a number of cities, from Greenland capital Nuuk to Christchurch after the earthquake in New Zealand, to New York, London, Moscow, Shanghai. The official reason for me being here is that, much to my joy, 2 weeks ago, this new book of mine was published in German. I have been supported by a stinking rich Danish foundation, Foundation for Built Environment Quality. And they thought that this humanist, this people-oriented dimension in city planning was really interesting, and they wanted to support it. So they supported my research center for many years. And then after I retired from university because I got too old and was thrown out, then they came again and said, we would like you to sit down and write down everything you know while you can still remember it. And I said, I have no time, I have to go to Bremen next week and all that. And then they said, isn't that a matter of how many assistants we can give you? And then they sat there with all their euro bills and whatever, and suddenly I had time. So we wrote the book, and it has, much to my joy, come out in all kinds of funny languages. It's even out in French. First book in French in 40 years. Of course not in France, because they supply themselves with culture. So it's from French Canada, but it's out in French. And then of course, a little bit later, it also was out in German last week, 2 weeks ago. And in between many funny languages, one of them Greek. And when they phoned me from Greece and said, we want to publish your book, I said, no, you have better things to use your money for. Don't waste money on my books. But they said, don't worry, because the Danish embassy paid the bill. And the Danish embassy told me that the Greeks need to learn to walk and bicycle more than anybody else in Europe, quickly. So they have the book. And now we have a German book. And also I should say that I will stay until midnight to sign books if any of you have got the book. What is the book about? Well, I could start somewhere else and say, this opportunity to sit down and think about what has happened in the 50 years I've been around in this game. It was, of course, lovely to start to think about what really has happened in all these years. And then came the story of the two old planning paradigms and the new one. One of the paradigms which around 1960 really started to be very dominant in city planning was the car invasion, that everything had to be done to make the cars happy, and the cars were streaming in and taking over completely our societies. All the cities had a major traffic problem. All the cities quickly had a transportation and a traffic department, and all the cities started to collect all the information they needed to make good planning to make the cars happy. And what happened was that not a single city at the same time had a department for pedestrians and public life, and not a single city had any information about how their city was used by people. So all the information they had was about how the city was used by cars. And as you know, what you have information about, that's what you plan for. So something was overlooked there, very much so. Then we saw in a long period in the 50 years that how gradually in a salami tactic the quality for people was eroded until a time when we forgot how nice a city could be. Like Joachim told that as a boy you were suddenly able to jump around in a pedestrian area. But over many years we lost a lot of quality in the cities. Of course it's worse in Romania. But now they have my book in Romanian, and it will quickly be sorted out, this traffic problem. The other paradigm which has been dominating now for better part of the 50 years I talk about is the paradigm of modernism, and all this about that you shall not make cities, you shall make individual buildings, that streets are not good, but grass is good, and high-rise is good, and whatever. All this we learned about, and if we go closer into this, which I will not do, but anyway, they were radical guys, Corbusier and the other guys. This is a plan for improving Paris from the late 1920s. The improvement plan was to take down entire Paris and build 24 high-rise buildings where all the Parisians could sit up there and look out on the grass and see how beautiful Paris would be. But my message today is really that we definitely have now a new planning paradigm. If you ask any mayor or senator what are the goals of this city, they will say the same. I want a livable, sustainable and healthy city. More and more we are interested in that there should be life in the city, that it should be livable quality of life. We have more leisure time, we have smaller households, we have more privatized life, we live for longer periods of time, and we have so much energy apart from the working time which we would like to use, and we have found that the cities is really a nice opportunity where we can together develop our culture. And we found that whenever we make a good quality people space, people come out in great numbers to use it, because the biggest interest of man, of Homo sapiens, is the other people. You can see some boys there who is sort of involved in this interest of other people. The other thing is, increasingly, especially after the Brundtland report in '87, we've started to realize that we have to do something for the climate. And I will not go into details here, but say that of course the C40 movement of mayors from the biggest city around the world, they realize that the major challenge to the climate comes from the cities, so the solutions will have to come from the cities. And there's a number of things you can do. But certainly it's a very smart thing to have people walk more and bicycle more, because that's good for climate. But also it is generally now realized, which is not rocket science, but if you need to have a better system for movement than the private motor car, if you need to have better public transportation of quality and good public realm, they're brothers and sisters, because you should be able to move to the bus stops and the tram stops and the train stations, whatever, in quality, in comfort, in safety. So if you are good to people, you are also potentially starting to be on the road to have a much better public transportation system. Then we've got another mover, that is, we have realized that for 50 years we made city planning which were deadly for people. Just 1 hour of modern exercise every day, walking for an hour, bicycling for an hour, some combination, that will give you 7 extra years of life. And that will give you a much better quality of life when you get older, and that will be much, much cheaper for society. So instead of having city planning which invites people not to move at all, we have learned that we shall make city planning where it's built in that you move yourself every day, not only on the weekend, but every day as part of your everyday pattern. If you look at the World Health Organization, they have this global action plan. Please, all cities, make sure that your citizens walk and bicycle as much as possible. And if we take a closer look at this lively, livable, sustainable, healthy, and realize that if we look carefully after the people in the city, then we are actually efficiently addressing all 3 items in this new paradigm. And this book is exactly about how you can make cities better for people, and in this way achieve more livable, more sustainable and more healthy cities. So, I'll show you some places where they have applied this kind of thinking already. So, there are cities who have specifically made a city strategy saying, in this city we'll do everything we can to invite people to walk and bicycle as much as possible in their daily doings. Copenhagen is one such city, and Copenhagen started very, very early. They started in 1962 when they closed the first street for traffic. And that was believed to be completely idiotic, because we were not Italians and we would never use public space, and we were Danes and the weather was further too bad and you can never do this in the northern part of Europe, so they did it. Next year we started to be Italians. And that was when you came up and played Italian on the streets of Copenhagen. Copenhagen started 53 years ago, and they've been at it ever since, increasingly more and more people-oriented. Also, Copenhagen became the first city in the world where the life of the city was systematically studied and documented, and this information was fed back to the city, and that was used very much in forming the policy of the city. When I retired as professor, I got from the mayor this wonderful letter saying, if you in university had not provided all this documentation about the life in the city, we at the city hall, we politicians would never have dared to make Copenhagen the most livable city in the world. So we found in Copenhagen that knowing about people is a very strong medicine for having a better city quality. It started with 1 kilometer of Main Street in '62, and if we go back to the same area now, all these areas and player squares and harbor fronts, whatever, has been addressed to become more people-friendly. And that is only the city center here. And I can see now that it's all in 3 or 4 phases. Phase 1, be good to the walking and promenade, push back the cars and let people walk. But then the next 20 years was more and more leisure time, and more people wanted to enjoy the city, enjoy the other people. So that was a time when the squares were cleared of parked cars, and the key word was we should do everything that people can stay and enjoy and have a good recreation. That was also the time when the cappuccino culture started to develop all over the world, even if it was very cold. I've seen wonderful sidewalk cafes in Greenland and in Iceland. The thing about cappuccino is it's not because of the coffee, but if you have a cup, you can sit in a city for 3 hours and watch people without anybody asking you a question why you're sitting here. You can just sort of and look around and look around. And it takes 3 hours for one cup. Recreation, the idea of that recreation was no more only to go out in the woods and the nature and the parks and look at the birds, but go into a wonderful city and look at the other people and see what was going on. That became more and more. The third phase in this century has been more and more towards making joyful squares, making places where you can play and do sports and activities. And what has happened in a city like Copenhagen, that they have more and more different types of places where people can go, including swimming in the harbor. Also, in Copenhagen now, in 2009, they made this new strategy about that in this city we would like to be the best city for people in the world. So they have a strategy, we will be the best for people in the world. It's not about making the city center good for people. The whole city should be a good quality for people. So all the streets are being changed from this configuration to this configuration, where instead of 4 lanes, they have 2 lanes, 1 aisle, they have median, they have bicycle lanes, they have street trees, they have wide sidewalks. That is happening all over the city because this lower street is much more safe, it's much more beautiful, it's much more friendly for people. And now we have a society where more and more people are elderly and also we have the traffic, so we have to get across the street, and having just 1 lane on each street in each direction is much safer than having more. Another thing which is characteristic of Copenhagen today is that pedestrians and bicycles are highly prioritized. So when you have a big street, a small street going into a big street, you take the sidewalk and the bicycle lane across the small street. Then the guy in the Mercedes will have to wait until there are no pedestrians anymore, then he can go quietly over there. The other thing about Copenhagen is they have been, ever since the oil crisis in '73, they've been very careful to invite people to bicycle. They have a citywide bicycle network. This is really being created into a transportation network. You can transport everything. Of all the children, families in Copenhagen, 33% has a cargo bike where they can bring the kids to school and kindergarten, whatever. It's become more and more safe to bicycle, especially in the crossings. They've done all kinds of tricks. And they have integrated more and more the bicycling with the other transportation means. So it's really smart now to go from one end of the city to the other. Bicycling really has become a culture. Everybody bicycles. The businessmen and the pregnant mothers and the children to school, whatever. Even the crown prince has been found to bicycle from time to time. And we now have 41% of all the people who go to work in Copenhagen, they arrive on a bicycle every day. Also in Copenhagen now, they have another strategy saying we will also be the best for bicycle in the world, and they have specific goals for every 3 or 5 years which you have to meet, and they go and check them every second year. Best city in the world for bicycles. Do we have problems in Copenhagen? Oh yeah, we have new problems, because now we have a major problem, serious congestion on bicycle lanes. It's almost impossible in peak hour to go on bicycle lanes. But that's a good problem, because every bicycle lane can have 5 times more people than can a car lane. So what do you do if you have too many bicycles? You double all the bicycle lanes in the city. And where do you get the asphalt from? You take it from the cars and the parked cars, so that you can have enough bicycles, because that's very good transport economy, because a bicycle lane can take so much more. Also, they've been forced to enlarge the section for bicycles in the trains. And who is this? Is this my grandmother? No, it is not. It is the Danish Minister of Culture. There was a series of photos of cultural ministers in European Union, and you were to sit in your favorite sofa and read your favorite book, and she came up to me and said, Jan, I took your book in the English version so people could see what I'm interested in. That's a good cultural minister, I can tell you. And she's also the one who has just made a national architecture strategy, architecture policy, which has the headline, let's put people first in architecture and planning. So she's a good girl. Are there other cities who have the same kind of modern city planning strategy? A very good example is Melbourne. And they have completely turned Melbourne around. So now it's by far the most exciting city on the southern hemisphere. They widened all the sidewalks, they put granite, they put furniture, they put street trees, they've taken the cars out on a number of streets. And when you go around in Melbourne today, it's really fantastic. It's like Paris, but the weather is better. And we found that also with increased quality, more and more people use Melbourne, and we found that all the economics factors are up, because in the 21st century, if you're sweet to people, you're also sweet to your economy. What are they doing now in Melbourne? They are going to introduce a Copenhagen inspired bicycle system, and Copenhagen's style bike lanes means the parked cars protect the bicycles instead of, in some places they have the bicycle protecting the parked cars. In all the cities, they started by starting to get an idea about how is this city used by people and how could it be better for people. That means exactly the same thing as the traffic engineers do. They count all the cars and then they say we need more lanes here. We count all the people and say we need more chairs here, we need benches here in the sun, we need better crossings here and there. And then you can see that over the time you can have these remarkable turnaround of cities. In New York, they have this fantastic plan of putting 5,000 kilometer of bicycle lanes into New York, saying no commuting in New York. You can bike, you can walk, and you can take our subway. And they're doing it in all parts of New York. And then they started to realize that there was not a bench and not a sidewalk cafe in all of New York. Everything was rushing around on sidewalks and no space for people. And then they started to want something like they have in other cities where you can sit and enjoy the city and whatever. And that led to the plan to close Broadway in all the important places. And this is Times Square in 2009 in the morning, and this is Times Square 2 months later. And now they made 50 squares like this in New York. And when they started, the mayor said, "Oh no, don't worry, it's only an experiment." Half a year later, he came out and said, "Experiment? No way, it's the biggest success in newer history of American planning. The closing, the establishing of people spaces." The mayor of Moscow heard about this, and they said, "We would like you to humanize Moscow, you can have 12 months. Moscow really was overrun by cars. And a nice city street might look like this at that point, because they have this idea that freedom from communism is a right to park everywhere without paying. So they have parked all the way on Main Street, Moscow, on the sidewalk, and there was virtually no place for people left. And there were hardly any people walking in Moscow in 2011. It was all swamped by cars. It was so unappetizing and unattractive that people, the few of them, they just walked from some metro station a few meters to where they had to go. Not very good. Then they came running and said, "How many books have you written? We want to translate all of them." And I said, "Yeah, you can have 3 of them." So 3 books were quickly translated and published by the city of Moscow. And the guy who's not so happy there, or at least he's reflective, that's a Danish ambassador. But then we were hired also in this city to come and study how the city was used by people and what could be done to make it a better city for people. And in the process, I was invited to dinner with the mayor, Sobyanin, and he said, "Jan, what would be in your report?" I said, "Maybe the idea of parking on Main Street, Moscow, is not the best idea I ever saw. I will have to make a comment about this in our report." Then 2 months later, I was back in Moscow. No parking on Main Street, Moscow. They were gone. That's the benefit of having a very efficient democratic system. And then you think the Russians will never accept this, but the mayor has this little car which goes up and down, and if you forget and put your car on the sidewalk, it's picked up and taken to Siberia. You think that this is very rude, but this is from Vilnius, just showing that one mayor after the other is into this game of making people-friendly, bicycle-friendly cities where you are a little bit restricted about people parking in your bike lanes. This is the miracle from Moscow. We started in December 2011, 1.5 years later. No cars on the sidewalk on Main Street, Moscow, but benches all the way from one end to the other. The grey street are beginning to be green, and all the advertisements which were filling the air, they have gone, and now you can see Kremlin in the distance. This, call this the miracle of Moscow. And they have not stopped here. They have gone on and started to change one part of Moscow after the other, and they have even introduced a paying system for parking. Now the mayor of Moscow can be found sitting at conferences and in magazines talking about the importance of making livable cities for the 21st century. To me, it's a little bit of a miracle that we've come so far that in all corners of the world, this is realized that we need cities of quality for people, and we shall not only make the cars happy, but it's more important to make the people happy. And then I met this Lan in Hanoi. She was in the Danish embassy, she's been in Copenhagen, and she came up to me and said, "Hey, do you have a baby boom in Copenhagen? I've just been over there and it's so full of children." I say, baby boom in Copenhagen, you must be crazy. We have a reproduction problem. There'll be none of us left 200 years from now if it wasn't for the Syrians who are coming now. But then I realized that what she has experienced going around was a lot of children in the public places in Copenhagen. There are many baby prams and kindergartens are taken all over. And we have all these cargo bikes which are transporting tons of children, and they like much more to sit in front of a cargo bike and look at the world than to be strapped into a car. And also they can have social gatherings in these cargo bikes. And all the parents bicycles in Copenhagen have 1, 2 or 3 children there, and they start early in the kindergarten. They are trained to bicycle. And as the moment you are 5 years and have learned, or 4 years and have learned to bicycle, my daughter told me you can take the children all over as you go together with them, and there are good infrastructure with proper bicycle lanes, with curbs here and there. Then you can take the children of 5 or 10 kilometers through the city. No problem, my friend. Lots of children on the streets of Copenhagen, and they start very early in Copenhagen. So, end of my story is that if you find a city where there are many children present in the city streets, it's a sure sign of quality and livability. Welcome to the 21st century. All these people have already tried the method. It works. And here is a little sign from Australia. We have worked on 250 cities across the world. Now it's our turn. So it works. People first. Thank you very much.